Alright, hi guys, welcome to Second Perspective. This is another episode of QQ. We are going to be discussing Locke here. There's going to be spoilers galore. You should have already seen the film, so there's really no need for a synopsis. But if you really need one, it's a dude in a car with problems and he tries to solve them over phone calls. That's essentially it. I'm again Paul, or for the first time really, Paul Weston.
You're for the first time Paul Weston.
Ever. And this is Torin, the smartass. Sorry, Torin McLaughlin. So we're going to be discussing Locke. On a very quick recap, I gave it an A- in review. Torin gave it a B, and we both had some small, slight issues with the writing, but Torin's issues sort of had him hang up on...
more complex and more considered than your issues, obviously.
Exactly that. So I'm wondering, do you want to get... Yeah, do you want to get right into the... Okay, well, I'll say something that I liked about the writing before we get into pooping on it. My first... Like, right at the beginning, often... Films and plays almost always need some sense of urgency, and when it's a dude in a car, if it's not going to explode like a bus in Speed, sometimes you can kind of get a little bit bored or something. So this film does a really good job of, at the beginning, is creating a certain amount of stakes, and like right instantaneously, it creates a time limit, or the idea that Tom Hardy's character has to get there or wherever he's going when you first don't know in about an hour and a half, and that he's leaving on a very important day that he's going to as Moriarty or Andrew Scott says, he's going to risk the sack or essentially get fired.
That was a funny phrase, risk the sack.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of interesting.
Which is kind of what he did in the first place, to put himself in that situation, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Anyways.
Because he bones another woman.
Yeah, I was going to say a sack bed. So what it does, it does a really good job of creating stakes in that sense, so that there is a certain sense of urgency through these conversations. And then once you get into like, oh, the person he's meeting is not his wife, he's slept with somebody and they're having his premature kid, okay, there's a certain amount of stakes. So I just want to say that for the script.
That it's got stakes.
Yes.
But where are the potatoes, Paul?
Yeah, where are the potatoes? Why don't you talk about potatoes?
Well, it's sort of small potatoes for me. Great segue. As far as like issues that I have with the writing, but the small things that I might have changed would have a trick. Oh, you're sort of pausing here. Am I still visible?
Oh, yeah. Don't worry.
Okay.
Skype is working for both of us.
Just want to make sure we're okay. I thought that I've tried to phrase this a few ways already. The theme of the film and the way that it was written were very similar.
What was written? Like the dialogue, the character.
The way the dialogue was written. I mean, it's all dialogue, right? So,
yeah.
Well, I guess you could say writing is storyboarding too, and plot.
Yeah.
Tom Hardy, the way that Tom Hardy's character evinces his philosophy, like the way that he puts into words what he feels and the way that he feels things should go, in that, I am going A to B, I have made a decision, all other things rest on this decision, and I have a plan to ameliorate any losses, or, I've got all the contingencies covered. There is a practical next step for every interaction that I'm having right now, I feel that the film tries to question when there isn't, tries to show us when there isn't a practical next step, and how those two systems look when they bump into each other, sort of thing. But I think that Tom Hardy's character tells us all of that anyway. He uses the words practical next step, and he asks his wife, after telling her that he's cheated on her, the first and only time in 15 years, he said, okay, I'd like to move to a practical next step, and she hangs up on him. Obviously so, right? And so it shows his character like butting up against this place where logic doesn't really have a place, where you can't plan for the emotional trauma or disintegration of your psyche when you get delivered the news that somebody isn't who you thought they were, that they did something, you thought they were a good person, and now they did something bad, you know? And so it also dealt with the problem of having to put ourselves in other people's hands and having them be our judges, because Tom Hardy's character continually is reassuring himself that he's doing the right thing, not what his father did, right? He's trying to show up for a child that he's bringing into the world and be there, and just by the fact of being there, it's a good thing. That's what he's decided, right? And that everything should follow from that, but everything does not follow sometimes, right? And I think that's sort of the point the movie was trying to make, but Tom Hardy basically comes out and says all of it. Locke says all of it.
Yeah.
I should really be saying Locke.
Yeah.
So that's, I don't know, I just felt like the text and the subtext were too close together, that we could have been given more room to guess at the theme than to have it stated so specifically by his character anyway.
So what would you hope for instead? Because like his character is based out of someone who at his job has to be sort of like the most detail-oriented person that I could imagine, because as he says in this kind of really cool little, I wouldn't say monologue, but a little speech about how if the concrete is not the proper concrete, the building will slip and then it'll crack, and then he does that cool little speech, and it sort of shows why he's perfect for the job, or he's been sort of slowly melded into this kind of personality where like everything has to go according to plan, or everything has to be proper, because what it seems like you're suggesting is that his character not sort of just 2x4 us with sort of his do you know what I'm sort of trying to get at? Like where is the room for, if you have Tom Hardy as this kind of, Locke as this kind of character, where's the room for sort of his straightforward personality? Where's the room to not be so 2x4 with the themes?
I don't know. I really don't know how else it could have been written. Oh, shit. Now you make me question myself, because actually some of the most interesting lines in the movie, and which became, it's basically all dialogue, right? So you just think about the writing. The shots didn't distract me that much. They're basically very on point with the theme and with the movement of the dialogue and his characters, like ups and downs. The shots all do a good job of following that and exaggerating his like moments of guilt and moments of joy, strange moments of joy and that sort of thing. So it's more like the lines, the writing is what you hold on to. And I thought the most interesting stuff was actually about his connection to just material things. Like he has a faith in concrete, which has no life of its own, but does whatever the person who pours it tells it to do, basically, and it has all these controllable parameters and that sort of thing. But he venerates concrete in a way that's kind of really interesting.
Or he romanticizes it, right?
Yeah, basically. It's like his best friend that he could ever hope for, concrete, and he wants to respect it above everything else, But why does he want to respect concrete? Is the interesting question. And I read something that said Stephen Knight, the writer, his other movies, which I have not seen, Eastern Promises or Pretty Dirty Things, they meditate on working class life in England, and so I have to think that he's trying to make some statement about that maybe the shortcomings, both the shortcomings and the triumphs of the working class mentality that says, okay, you have a problem and it can be fixed. A very positivistic attitude, which stems from the sort of construction foreman mentality of there are many pieces, yes, there are many things that could go wrong, yes, but the important thing is to hold fast,
Yeah,
So to respond to your question about how else it might be written, I don't know. I actually think it did a pretty good job I thought the writing was good. I thought there were a lot of good lines, but maybe it was just a bit obvious. I don't know. Because I like to reach that conclusion by myself. I like to reach a conclusion that, maybe that stems from like a working class mentality, and what we're seeing here is the limits of a philosophy that comes from having to deal with dirt basically every day. you know. But I like to get there myself instead of just, he's a construction foreman and he thinks maybe that emotional problems can be handled in the same way that physical ones can, as if with brick and mortar you can do with the heart and soul, you know.
Well, I don't, it might be even not necessarily that it's you know, oh yes, he thinks he can, and the writer's saying, oh look, it works, but it's actually quite a tragic sort of mindset. And, like, it's the only thing that he has. I mean, what is he going to turn into, like, Dr. Phil all of a sudden? He can't. He's been built. And, like, we're shown that this character for 9 years. And, like, that's something else I thought was interesting is, like, his just sort of fascination. Not even fascination, but his just strong hold on details. Like, even when his boss is arguing with him, being like, I tried to not get you fired. You've been with us for 10 years. He goes, 9. It's like, that's the most important thing to you right now, is that he says 9 years, not 10. Like, they're firing you. But I saw, I guess, less of it, like, I don't know, I guess my sort of focus when I was watching the film is just, he's ultimately, I feel, he's probably a tragic hero, and his whole thing is that everything has to follow certain details, and that everything can be fixed. But not just by, like, oh, you know, everything can be fixed. It's everything can fix it. Or everything can be fixed and I can fix it. And, like, and by doing that, by pushing. Right? You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't ever go, maybe I should just trust people, or maybe I should back off, or maybe I should just beg for forgiveness. Like, and just go, I'm sorry, I've screwed up, and please tell me what I can do. He never said that, right? Never, what can I do? Please let me know. It was, I'm sorry, here's what I'm going to do to fix it. Right?
Yeah, and he almost, like, in that, I don't even know if he does say, I think he does say once, I'm sorry, in the film.
Who to?
I think to his wife, and I think it's like, she almost has to wheedle it out of him, sort of thing, and it's after a few of their conversations. But even if he does or does not, doesn't really truly matter. I think the fact that I can't find it right now is sort of making the point already. But he moves past the sorry so quickly, it's almost as if it never happened. Because he says to his wife, first thing, I want to find a practical next step, right? And it's like, that's not the way the heart works.
Yeah, no, exactly
so
that.
I guess what you're saying is, yes, it is tragic, and I think I agree with you there.
Yeah, maybe the writer was focusing on that, you know, this is sort of a tragic element to certain people, right? And less of, like, here, I'm trying to spoon feed you.
Yeah, right? And it's like, it's not a sort of stereotype view of a construction. I mean, it is pretty limited and one-dimensional, but the stereotype of a construction foreman is often, like, I met a guy today who was quite a wiener, and he's basically just like, yeah, get it done. No, you can't get in our way. You can't drive your truck here. We can't move our trucks for you. You know, that sort of thing. Yeah. Which is not, he's actually quite considerate in certain ways, you know, but what he's, he's very intelligent, and I think he is emotionally intelligent, but part of the reason why he's going to meet his mistress and the baby that she's about to have is so that he doesn't repeat the mistakes of his father. So he doesn't see his father in himself, which is what he struggles to do. And in fact, he begins to by the end of it. And I think it's because he throws himself into such a quandary.
The more we talk about this, the more I realize it's basically just like a tragic hero. Right? I mean, maybe I'm dumb for not noticing that right off the bat. But I guess, I mean, you and I, we don't ever have a structure to this thing, so let's just go straight to the end anyways.
Yeah, who cares?
Yeah, like, with the ending, I mean...
Sorry, Internet.
Nice. What did you take from the ending? Like, was he victorious, or was he victorious at a huge cost? Like...
well, yeah, I think. Well, where did he win? Here's a more interesting way to put that. With whom did he succeed? In which relationships will he have succeeded when they carry themselves out, or wherever they, like, seem to be going at the end of it? the fate of the construction task ultimately rests on like the completion of the task itself, which is sort of up in the air, even though we know that he's pulled a lot of strings and you know, sort of made his second in command able to carry out this mammoth task, and like despite problems and that sort of thing, seems like it might actually be pulled off. So sort of a success there. With Beth and his mistress, it seems like the movie ends on the line, she asks him, "Are you coming?" He says yes. And it seems that even though he's not going to say he loves her, she will obviously appreciate and admire him coming to support her in the hospital, even though that's not like his entire motivation to go there. It's sort of a thing that he tells himself to cover up for other motivations. But with his wife, I don't think he succeeded, right? The person maybe that he's succeeded with most, I think, is himself, just by saying, yes, I'm going to stick to something, and then sticking to it, you know? But what's the point of sticking to something? It's sort of very arbitrary, you know, what you choose to stick to.
Well, I mean, okay, let's just think about for a moment here, like, what if he did not stick to that? What if he actually just, like, yielded to people, and, as he said, like, drove away, drove in the opposite direction and headed to the hospital and stuff? I mean, would he have ended up in a better position? I mean, he probably would have, because there's this one line in the film where his wife is like, "Do you still want Cassidy's number?" Right after he makes this long spiel about, like, I can't remember what the spiel was about, but probably like how he loves her and all that stuff. And I admire him for his honesty, right? Be like, yes, I still want the number, but like, it's probably one of the most like obvious, like, do I look fat in this dress kind of thing. You don't, right? It's just
don't say.
Right?
Well, you're very right, because I think that's the question that she uses to disguise, do you want to be with me or not, right? But the thing is, like, he confuses the fact for the fact of the question, the statement for the implication, right? So maybe that's another way that this movie succeeds, is that at the level of detail where it's just too, like, he's okay. That's the moment when she decides that they're not going to be together anymore, that she's not going to let him come home. It's not his home anymore. And she, like, talks to her sisters after that to convince herself that that's the right decision, maybe, I think. Or maybe it's before that. I can't remember. But
I think it was after.
That's the test that she gives him, basically. And I think it's
fails
silly to
so
expect, silly to say that, like, he doesn't understand what the question means, right? But
so you're saying he does or does not understand?
I think he does know that, like, she's looking for him to say no, or she's asking it rhetorically, like, if you say yes, it will show me that you care more about the job than about me, you know? Which is sort of a vanity, but sometimes you have to indulge those things, you know? You have to indulge people and their vanities.
Yeah, and
I don't know. At the same time, like, the thing would not get done probably if he didn't get Cassidy's number. Funnily enough, we find out that Andrew Scott's character found the number completely on his own. You know, so there's the vagaries of fate where it's just like, oh, I'm fortune's fool.
Well, yeah, it's kind of interesting there because it's just. Sorry, I just kind of.
It's supposed to be sort of funny, like, you laugh at how awful things are going for him, but isn't that just the way it is? Murphy's Law, you know? You fucking dig yourself a hole, and somebody else has already, you know, I don't know.
Yeah.
Done it.
Like, you shoot yourself in the foot to get a key to the door, and then someone's like, "Oh, I found the key." You're like, oh, "Okay, well, sure."
It's like Saw, you know, if somebody had found the key right after that.
Yeah, you're like, really? Why don't we...
Where were we?
Yeah, no, like, we were just talking about sort of Locke as a character and sort of, like, his... sort of the internal struggle that he has, right? And, like, whether he's actually capable. And I think what, like, also we were coming around to is realizing that what the script is about, or at least I think it's trying to show us, is this character that is very clearly very intelligent, but his sort of, like, you know, tragic flaw or what have you is that he can't he just can't give up his own ways, and that he's as stubborn as concrete, or like as firm as concrete. So you kind of use that, because like if you just yielded, because like actually that's probably a good segue into like the soliloquies or whatever with his father.
Right, which we haven't discussed at all yet.
Yeah, which I think we should probably touch on. But yeah, like he's fighting so hard to not be his father. I don't think he realizes that he's ultimately driving himself towards that anyways by not yielding and not bending. He thinks that by holding on to this idea that like he's gonna be with Bethan, I think his name, or Bethany, or
Beth.
Bethan. Okay. He thinks by being with her he will distance himself by further away from his father, but he doesn't realize he's just pulling himself closer by treating all the other people around this sort of problem,
right,
in a unyielding kind of fashion, right?
Yeah, well, like if he blames his father for making a choice to stay out to leave, and he obviously stuck to that choice or something, or if he maybe sees his substance addiction as a choice, then he's basically making everybody in his life conform to a choice that he's made, just the same as his father was, Anyway, but I don't think the movie doesn't. It's not really in there that he suggests that. One thing that the little asides to the
backseat.
What's it called? It's called an apostrophe to a figure that's absent. His father, the apostrophe to his father brings up his relationship with the car, because it's interesting. I think everybody who's been in a car, which is most of the people that will potentially watch this, and I know you and I have both been in cars at some point in our life.
How we've been in a car together.
Oh yeah, that's suggestive, man. But sometimes you do feel that somebody's sitting there in the back seat watching you, and like that little headrest, can take on a phantom persona, and you speak to figures that you create and have them sitting in the back seat or something. Like you argue with them, and they could be figures from your past, or they could just be it's really whimsical sort of thing. But his is like intense, and it's probably something that carries on outside the car, I'm sure. But his relationship with his car is interesting because it's the ground on which he projects his father's image too, and it also mirrors his psychological state, where he's like very frantically sort of pushing buttons and pulling strings in very many different arenas when he's dealing with the different characters. Like, here's my companion, my life companion, and I have to reason and apologize and that sort of thing. Like, what's the best strategy to move forward here? What's the best strategy to move forward with my second in command, who has maybe a drinking problem, but who I need to push forth and complete the job and that sort of thing. And so his car is like an extension of himself, because he's got all the numbers on speed dial. And it's sort of this like very zen space that somehow absorbs all of this like calamity and the chaos, but he's still comfortable in it, I don't know. The car was an interesting part of it for me, and it's something that we haven't talked about yet. But it is its own persona, and it overlaps with his in a way that's like very significant.
Do you want to keep going with that in terms of his relationship to his car?
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously, a lot of people find themselves in similar relationships, right? And the movie might not make sense in certain ways to people 50 years ago. Like, obviously, they'd be wondering at the technology and everything, but I don't know. Whatever. I don't think that really
Pass. Interesting.
I don't know. The car is like it's the most comfortable spot for me to be. And if I had to be in a situation like that, he's obviously like avoiding everybody in his car in a way, right? He's interacting with their voices, with them virtually, but he doesn't see any of their faces, right? The car is a bit of a mask. And sometimes when it zoomed out in traffic, I was like, okay, well, it parallels the situation that you find yourself in, where you look around at traffic and you're like, I wonder what everybody else is doing right now in their cars. I wonder what their lives are going, because it's just, it's a shell inside of which are so many possibilities.
Well, this is kind of interesting, because I don't drive, right? Like, I'm unable to for medical reasons.
Right.
And so I don't know that I've ever had to kind of connection to my car like that. Like I have felt like when I'm in a car, it's sort of almost like a cubicle or like a fort where I can like I feel a little bit safer and I can just like stare at other people or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But I haven't had, I don't know that I've had that sort of connection to a car before. That's kind of interesting.
Well, it brings up a lot of interesting questions that I think if there's a space to say that the movie leaves things open to interpretation in any way, it's with this suggestion of the car, you know, because obviously everybody else on the road, like him, is in their car. Who are they with? Maybe they're alone. Probably a lot of them are, you know, and we spend quite a lot of time in cars, and it is a way of avoiding each other, though we can still stay connected. And it's a way to sort of like disembody yourself and become a brain, or like, you know, become more just a brain, or more just a presentation to people than an actual embodied object.
Well, why don't we go on sort of a more concrete level, or just sort of an entertainment just on an entertainment level, on the setting, it being in one location, that one single car. Do you think it was successful? I mean, like,
well, I think because of the reasons I just said, because it made me think about it. Anyway, just to say that.
Yeah. Because for me, I mean, like, the cinematography, the fact that I didn't kind of go, man, this shot's, like, I've seen this shot for a really long time, or, like, can I see something else, or whatever. Like, I didn't have any of those questions, which I have had before, watching plenty of other films, even my own short film. I'm not sure how the director did it, but I think that's quite commendable in its own sense, that he was able to use enough different angles, and this is clearly editing as well, like very clever editing, that I never felt sort of that the shots felt stale, right? And so I wish I knew how he was doing that, and that's why that's still probably one reason why I would go back to watch this film again, is to sort of kind of analyze that. But I was curious if, like, you had any theories as to, first of all, if you felt the same way about the shots, and second, if you had any sort of theories on why it worked the way it did.
Well, as you say it now, it's jumping out to me that, like, the writing, the choice to film according to one very big limitation, you know, and around which everything else revolves, sort of parallels Locke's own situation, right? He's got to negotiate the rest of his life, the rest of his drama around one decision, right? Anyway, I just thought that if from a writing exercise point of view, it seems like if that was the genesis of it, then it was a pretty successful exercise, right? Anyway, the choice to stay in one shot. Yeah, I think it. If I go back to what I was saying before, it sort of continues the theme that traffic is a cipher, you know, and a car is a cipher. So our technology and our, like, infrastructure for technology and that sort of thing become places to disappear. I don't know. They're intensely personal, and yet nobody else, if you want it to be this way, nobody else really knows anything about what's going on in there. That's one thing that he keeps saying again: if the traffic is okay, I'll be there and everything will be okay. If the traffic is okay. I don't know. What about that? What about that line?
What do you mean?
What about that line? Did you like that line? What do you think it...
if the traffic's okay? Well, I just found it really interesting that he seemed to have some sort of like obsession, or he would repeat things almost like a mantra.
Yeah.
And I think it just sort of at risk of going back into a sort of circular loop of talking about Locke's personality and emotion, like, or inability to deal with emotion. He would just repeat lines like, if the traffic's okay, if the traffic's okay. Although I found it kind of interesting that a lot of, at least in the first part of the film, people kept saying, "This is a joke. This is a fucking joke. Are you a clown? Are you wearing a big fucking red nose?" Like all these, like there were a number of different people saying that, and they sort of repeating the things back to him. And in the writing, there were very slight. As I looked it up, they called it Pinter-esque kind of writing. I've looked a little bit at Harold Pinter's writing, where it's almost a little bit non sequitur. And there's there's one line. Crap, I can't remember. But he would be saying like, crap. I'm not gonna say it and just make myself look like an idiot. But there was a lot of like non sequitur lines, and there's a certain like rhythm to these lines, and I just thought it was kind of interesting where how the writer was able to do that with where it was basically all the conversations felt very organic and like they were conversations, yet if you took an extra second or two to kind of analyze the lines, there was a rhythm to them, and also there were there's a certain rhythm and a little bit of a play, stage play kind of element to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's funny how the technology in this case actually made all that possible. In what other scenario would somebody be able to manage all of these relationships at one time,
Yeah.
Couldn't make this film really, because on a computer even it would be difficult unless you're Facebook. I guess Facebook would work or something like that. Yeah. But the traffic helps him with his decisions, right? And it like teaches him and guides him, and he has faith in it and that sort of thing. As I don't know, the traffic is almost his moral compass at some points. But I just think that it's poignant that nowhere else would he be able to make a decision like this and then deal with the ramifications with all the people around him in his life anywhere else but like a luxury vehicle.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know, the conditions of possibility for the moral decision that he makes are only those conditions because of the technology that exists for him.
Well, do you have any last remaining things you want to tackle before we sort of wrap everything up?
No, I'm sort of like, my brain's drying up now on this one.
Yeah, it's and that sort of thing.
I think it was a really, really good movie, I guess, just to start wrapping things up and to keep talking without floundering here. Yeah. And I think I know a little more now. Maybe I'll upgrade it to a B+. I know more now about why I like it and why it succeeded. And I think because it does a good job, the writing does a good job making the character of this person, and I think the character is stereotypical of a certain class ideology, right? So a certain point of view of working class people and a philosophy of get it done and that sort of thing. Get it done and that sort of thing. I'm not really making that much sense right now. I think the writing does a good job. The dialogue is natural in all of the contexts, in all of the relationships. It's natural. The voice acting is really good. Acting aside, very good. But writing-wise...
Well, I think, like, this film... Is like, oh, did you say... Yeah, no. I was saying, ultimately, like, I think what we're getting to, like, our discussion over the last, like, half an hour, the point that we're ultimately getting to is that there were some parts of the script that we were not sure that we were totally fond of, but ultimately the script does a really good job on sort of the fundamentals of script writing in terms of actually just making the dialogue entertaining, believable, having your characters all have a very clear objective so they're not just plot points for the character. Like, I never felt like in this story that these characters were just pieces that Locke had to deal with, or like plot points. They all had a very clear reason why they were in this world, and they all had very distinct needs. And it's not easy to do that in any capacity, as well as making it still entertaining with one guy sitting in the car for 90 minutes. Like, all you have are people, all you have at your disposal is people interacting with each other through a car phone. So, like, yeah, I'm more and more firm on the idea it's an A-, and that the qualms that you had with the writing, they're becoming sort of smaller to me, just because of all the other writing elements that the director/writer executed so well, plus just how well the acting, how strong the acting is. Yeah, it's just the things that it did well, it did really freaking well, and the things that we have issues with are not things that are gonna sink the boat. Right?
Yeah,
I think that's ultimately what at least what I've come to. What about you? Any closing thoughts before we head out?
I think I would upgrade it to a B plus, largely because of what I've been thinking about in our discussion just recently, about the relationship to technology that's portrayed there. But I think with that, there could have been more that they might have shown. It's just a Bluetooth connection, and it's just a phone, right? But maybe that's, I don't know. It's a very minimalist piece of work, obviously, because even in the setting of the car, there's really only one piece of gadgetry that he uses. And at the beginning, it's all like the conveniences and comforts of the clicks and security, fastening sounds and that sort of thing, and the start of the engine, and that you get a good sense of that, like, this is his home. And they do it really well, really economically, with those little sound bites. And it's almost like a car commercial when he gets into his BMW. It's this sort of sacred space. He takes off his boots, right? Where else do you do that? In a church. Obviously, it's because he doesn't want to leave cement footprints, which I thought was a really good image. Yeah, it's a good image, and I think it explains itself right away. It doesn't mean that, I don't know, it's almost like his choices must leave a mark in the lives of other people, and that's the secure part about himself, to himself. That's what makes him known to himself, is that the choices he makes, everybody will know and abide by, you know? Even if it means chipping off cement footprints from a floor, which is very like leaving phantom images in somebody's past, as the father has done, right? So in some ways he does become his father, and I think that's probably, like you were saying before, what makes him tragic is his steadfastness in his philosophy, right?
His steadfastness.
I think it was very successful there, and imagistically, it worked well with the theme of the movie. I just thought that, like, maybe
he just wanted more.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to pinpoint where, but I think that everything that it... Oh, whatever. It was a B plus movie. It was very good. Go see it. I don't think I need to see it again, but it's not because I didn't like it. It's because I liked it enough not to need to see it again. I don't know. And I think that speaks to its impactfulness.
Yeah.
Anyway.
All right.
That's probably as much as I can say about it right now.
Yeah. No, it's all good. So, again, just in case you missed it, I gave it an A minus. Torin is now given a B plus. Thanks for listening. Pardon?
I changed my mind to not be like Locke.
Yeah. There you go.
The
yeah, but hopefully you enjoyed our discussion. We're hoping to do this fairly regularly, and yeah, hopefully you'll join us for more of them. Again, I'm Paul Weston, and beside me on this side, no, this side, I'm pretty sure it's on this side, is Santa Claus. No, John McLaughlin.
I know, I need to, it's getting fuzzy.
Alright guys, hope to see you on the next one.
By the way, we're both Canadian. This is, I use this shirt to work and sleep in. So,
alright, you gonna say goodbye to the internet, or?
Yeah, good night. Good night, internet.
Alright, peace guys.
Bye.